Hello and welcome to Assembly Update. I'm Audrey Pitcher, here today with Assemblyman Jeffrey Dinowitz from the Bronx. Assemblyman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Now, late last week, we passed the New York State budget, which had a number of negotiations. We spent 2 days debating that on the floor. Can you talk to us a bit about what is in the final budget this year?
Well, first, most New Yorkers do not know that the budget was 5 weeks late, and I'm sure most of them don't care. But they should care about the budget itself. So the budget for the state for the coming fiscal year, which started April 1st, is over $254 billion. That's $250 billion. So it's a lot of money, but we do a lot of stuff with that lot of money. And I have a whole bunch of notes here because there's so much in the budget. But for example, and this is one of the things which I think some people might like, the state is spending $2 billion to give tax rebates to people. Some families will get $400, some will get less, but it's going to go to people below a certain income. So if you make between $75,000 and $150,000, you're going to receive a $150 rebate for an individual and $300 for a couple. It'll be a little less for people higher income, a little more for people lower income. And our office can have specific information if anybody's interested. But the point is, they will be getting a rebate. This was one thing the governor wanted to accomplish. You know, she claimed that, well, because of inflation, sales tax revenue has increased. So it's like an inflation rebate, as she's referring to it. You know, we all like to have extra money in our pockets. I mean, some of us might have preferred getting more programmatic money done, but I think most people will like this. There's also going to be an additional child tax credit up to $1,000 for people with children under 4, and $500 for people from 4 to 16. So those are good things to help make things a little bit more affordable. And with the fear of significant inflation coming because of Trump's tariffs, which will drive up prices, this will certainly come in handy for people. But we did more than just that. We provided for more money for education, for example. I mean, we always add money to education, but I think we did pretty decently this year. The funding for education for the new budget will include $37.6 billion for general support of the schools, which is up $1.7 billion. And it includes $26.4 billion in what's called foundation aid. So New York does a lot to support our local schools. We spend a huge amount of money in New York City on schools. I'm not sure we're seeing the results that we want, no matter how much money we spend. So maybe part of our problem is not even related to money, but certainly money doesn't hurt. And we did well in a whole bunch of other areas, you know, higher education, housing. We created the Housing Access Voucher Program. And money there is going to be used to keep, you know, lower income people in their homes rather than allowing them to become homeless. More funding in the area of health and consumer protections. But we also finalized some of the stuff we've been talking about in recent weeks concerning discovery in the criminal justice process, and also mask legislation. Masking was very controversial. Some people were against any restrictions on masking. I'm not sure if that would be all the time, because as we know, the Proud Boys, when they did some of their horrible things, they wore ski masks in some cases. We know who wore white hoods at times, and we also know that some people commit crimes while wearing a mask, and ICE agents may even wear hoods when abducting people from the streets. So, you know, masking, people who are concerned about restrictions on masking may want to think twice about that. But the legislation we passed is pretty straightforward. And essentially it says, if you're committing a crime, and that crime could be, you know, harassing somebody during a demonstration, or, you know, other things that have happened during some of the protests. But it's not only relating to protests. But if you're committing a crime, if you're wearing a mask while you're doing it, that will cause an additional charge, a Class B misdemeanor, which is not a high-level crime, but another, and ultimately it's an additional crime. So if you're wearing a mask while committing a crime or fleeing from a crime, an additional charge. So as I've said, don't wear a mask while you're committing a crime, and don't commit a crime while you're wearing a mask, and you should be okay. Now, some people have had issues with this subject because of, they're concerned about the First Amendment. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if they're as concerned about the First Amendment when it comes to some people than with others. And while it's true that a lot of this was inspired by the horrible anti-Semitic and certainly anti-Israel things that have been going on, particularly on some of the college campuses, it's not just about that, and it's not just for one group. And I would hope that people out there would be sensitive to what has been happening with the enormous increase in anti-Semitic crimes, hate crimes in our country, in our state, and in our city. In fact, the ADL put out a study recently that said that last year in the United States there was an anti-Semitic crime every hour of every day of the entire year. But this masking legislation is not just about that. And I always think back to when I was a kid. It's not even when I was a kid only. When you see these I don't know, Western movies, the bad guys were the ones who were wearing the mask, the bank robbers and people doing bad things. People doing good things don't necessarily wear masks. Now, there are people who wear masks for health purposes, and that's not affected by this new law at all, despite what some groups have said. Groups like the New York Civil Liberties Union just absolutely were not correct or telling the truth when they called this a mask ban. That was just an out-and-out lie, in fact. So we've gotten that done. We've made reasonable changes to discovery, which help prosecutors in the sense that not as many cases will be dismissed for the tiniest of violations if the prosecutor made every effort and showed due diligence in terms of trying to present and turning over evidence. So we made some changes which the district attorneys are satisfied with and which do not overturn the discovery forms that we enacted 6 years ago. So that was really very important. And the cell phone ban in schools, I think is very important. It would be really great if kids can spend their school day learning instead of, talking to their friends and whoever, and going online and, sending back and forth pictures and all kinds of other things, much of which is not a good thing. But the money stuff that we did in the budget, which is what most people think of when they think about a budget, is really going to be very significant. The affordable housing initiatives, the changes we made to health care, and one thing which I think is important in my district, we put in $80 million for Mitchell-Lama preservation. So I'm hoping some of that money comes into some of the buildings in my district. We want to not only build new affordable housing, we want to preserve the affordable housing that we already have. And so there's just like a laundry list of good things that we did. I haven't heard much criticism this year, which is kind of amazing. So this is good.
Now,
yeah.
As the chair of the Public Safety Committee, how would you say the budget allocations for that went?
Well, we've provided certainly funding for a number of things in the area of public protection, and of course I can't find the specifics here, but in terms of preventing gun violence and just a number of other things. We provided money both on the prosecutor side and on the defense side to make sure that that these reforms and discovery and speedy trial, that they can be carried out properly. We want to make sure that every person who was accused of a crime, that their rights, their due process is protected, but we also want to make sure that we have the tools to prosecute those crimes. So I think we did generally well in that area. I know in my own district, I've secured an allocation of $250,000 each for the Kingsbridge Heights Community Center and the Marshall Montefiore Community Center for programs that they have to combat drugs, gangs, gun violence, all the worst things that you don't want teenagers doing. And so by putting money into those kind of programs, we're hoping to prevent, use of drugs and guns and gangs and all that. And so those two organizations are great organizations in our district. I've been supporting them all of my tenure in the Assembly, and they do good work. They touch the lives of thousands and thousands of people each and every year, and it's great to work with them and with other organizations also. But I've chosen to put some of the funding that I'm able to secure into that. I've also gotten funding for some anti-hate initiatives, to combat not only anti-Semitism but all forms of hate. And we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of good stuff happening. There's also a lot of bad things happening, and we have to do everything to make sure that young people, in particular, are educated and understand, what to do and what not to do. So hopefully it'll be a good year.
Absolutely. And what would you say people in the Bronx and in your district specifically should especially be looking out for in this budget?
Well, I think that, and this is very general, I think the money we put into education and into healthcare, those are the two big ticket items in the budget, and those are the ones that impact more people the most. But all the other things, the child tax credit, the inflation rebate, funding for housing initiatives, all those things impact a lot of people in our communities. And so while most people aren't aware of this big budget battle, because it's not on the front pages of the New York Times. They cover the federal government, they cover the city. They're not as thorough at covering this. So a lot of people don't really know, but the fact is, when we pass a budget of $250 billion, it impacts all of us.
Definitely, that is definitely true. Well, we definitely look forward to discussing the budget later with you, and we look forward to seeing what else this budget and this fiscal year and this session has to bring.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.